Hello and welcome. My name is Chris Kowalik, and I'm the president of the Rodan Consulting Group. And today we're going to quickly discuss in this video the structure of your Genos Emotional Intelligence profile. You may have done a 360 survey or a 180 survey, or possibly even a self-survey. This video is where you are going to discuss the 360 survey, but it's applicable to the other surveys that you may have taken. So today, I want to talk to you about how the feedback report is structured so you can make sense out of the data, and this will help you in creating that individual development plan out of the data. We'll talk about some next steps, and of course, we're always open to your questions and your comments. So an emotional intelligence survey like this is really looking about how you show up to others and different groups of other people that report to you, clients, and so forth. Something that is very apropos to this activity is this quote from Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And this is the essence of your interactions with other people. What is the impression that you leave with them? How do you show up? Likewise, think about your own experiences with others. You are often left with a feeling about how someone has treated you, not specifically about what they said or what they did. Genos surveys, these assessment surveys that we offer, are appropriate for all different levels in the organization. We have specific assessments for leaders and for individual contributors. And again, we have formats that include a true 360, a 180, or a self-assessment. And so these profiles can be used for managers or leaders or people that are aspiring to leadership positions. And when we do a team together, we actually can produce a team profile as well as an engagement survey. And so your group may have participated in such. I like to remind people of how we position this particular type of survey amongst other assessments that we do. And the model I constantly like to use is 3 layers of an onion, with the outside layer being our skill sets. And this is where our leadership skills and our emotional intelligence skills rest. The good news is these are skills, and skills are things we can learn. The next layer is how we show ourselves, our style, and we measure that often with DISC assessments. And then many of you have participated with us in DISC assessments, and then underneath our style is our core traits or our core self. And we measure that with our PXT select assessment. And again, many of you have participated in that. And as part of this process, you and I will meet and discuss your survey. But if you have participated in a DISC or a PXT or both, we will connect that data to your skills. And why we like to do that is that I might have a gap in my skills, but how I close that gap might be dependent on my particular style or some of my core traits. Another thing I'd like to remind you of is we are measuring other people's perception of you in the workplace. It's simply a perception. I have some famous people shown here, and if I ask 10 people in a room their perception of these famous people, we're going to get 10 very distinct observations, surely. Remember that when you are reading your survey, and think about the people that you asked to rate you, and just remember that they have some certain perception of you. And as hard as it might be to see or hear that, it's better to know that, right, than have a blind spot. And one of the things that we can think about is that we often measure ourselves by our intention. but we measure others by their behaviors and actions. So I may have an intention to be on time to meetings. However, and I'm very earnest in that intention. However, I may be constantly just a tad late. And I forgive myself because maybe I feel like I'm working on something really important, maybe mentoring others, but the people in the meeting just observe the discourteousness of being late. So again, this speaks to the idea of perception. The type of data you're going to look at, particularly if you did a 180 or a 360, is about the other people's perceptions. And so it is like looking in a three-way mirror and seeing sides of the you that maybe you weren't aware of. And that's what we want to explore in a healthy way to allow you to decide, well, maybe there's some things I might want to work on. And in terms of those of you that are leaders or aspire to be leaders, this particular quote I really like is, one of the hardest tasks of leadership is understanding that you are not what you are, but what you're perceived to be by others. And this doesn't mean we want you to change who you are at your core. This is just about awareness. And self-awareness is our linchpin in being able to make conscious and intentional decisions about how we want to show up, how we want to behave. So let's talk about your report. By now, you should have received a color-coded personalized report in a PDF format, a workbook, and a link to an interactive portal. Basically, it's the same login that you use to take the survey yourself. And that allows you to review your results online. We'll talk about that in a bit. And we're looking at behaviors that are structured around emotional intelligence competencies. And we're looking at 6 different competencies. And what we're after is to understand where we are on the continuum from an unproductive state to a productive state. And the 6 areas we're looking at for leaders are self-awareness, awareness of others, authenticity, emotional reasoning, self-management, and inspiring performance. And this is slightly different for the surveys for individual contributors. Now, how is the survey structured? In the beginning, you'll notice in your report, in each section for each rater group, and if you did a 360, you'll have several rater groups. If you did a 180, you only have one rater group. If you did a self-assessment, this will not be relevant to you. But your group of raters are asked to peg on a scale of 1 to 5 how familiar they are with you. And then we also get an understanding of the consistency of the responses. So what familiarity means is just what it sounds like. If your rater group on average pushes the familiarity out to 4.5 or 5, that means they're highly familiar with you and your behaviors. And so that data is going to be very, very meaningful to you. At the opposite end, if your familiarity score with a group of raters is very low, we don't want you to throw out the data. Don't dismiss it. However, we want to be a little cautious about it because it means when someone is rating you, they didn't have as much contact with you to maybe rate you fairly, if you will. So that's an important parameter to look at. And for each rater group, you get a score for this. Now let's look at consistency of responses. Consistency of responses is just that. How consistent within a rater group are the answers? If the answers are very consistent, this score will be closer to 5. That means almost everybody rated you in the same way. Most people in that group saw you in the same way. At the opposite end, as shown here, if your consistency is very low, this does mean that your raters within that group experienced you very differently. So they saw different aspects of you, or they didn't experience you in the same settings sometimes. If the consistency of the responses is low and we're averaging the results, then the data is very spread out, if you will. And you and I will discuss that in detail if this occurs, but we need to, again, be careful if the consistency of the responses is low. It's still meaningful though, because that means within that group, that people within that group are experiencing you quite a bit differently. Okay. So now let's look at, again, how the results are summarized. For each of the 6 areas, you get a summary of the data, and this is done for each rater group. So again, with a 360, you'll have multiple rater groups. With a 180, you'll just have one rater group, and this isn't relevant for a self-assessment. So a rater group, within the rater group, will average out what is the level of importance that the rater group put on this particular competency, self-awareness. Notice in this example, it's pretty high. It's pretty important. It's 4.1. And then you get the average of that rater group, what they rated your demonstrated behavior. So your demonstrated behavior was less than what the level of importance was. So a 3.5. Above average or typical, but not more than others and not significantly more than others. Okay, so you get that summary, and we do this for each of the 6 areas. Also, you'll notice a little box here. This is what we call the benchmark. This is what we would say is a typical of a good or very good performer. So in this example, the individual is falling short a little bit of the benchmark relative to that benchmark. Okay. So then this is a summary of the behaviors that make up the competency of self-awareness or awareness of others or authenticity. Then we break that down further so you can see exactly what behaviors comprise this average. And here's that example for authenticity. Again, you will have a table like this for each of your rater groups. And under authenticity, you see that there are 7 items or 7 behaviors that are measured. So you see exactly what these are. And then you see the average for everyone in that group, what they rated the importance of that behavior to be. So in this example, the highest, the most important to this particular group of raters for this particular individual was number 3, facilitates robust and open debate. Okay, 4.3. And then their least important were these 2, is open about their thoughts and feelings and so forth. Then the next column gives a score of demonstrated behavior on a 1 to 5 score. So in this case, facilitates robust open debate was scored as an importance of 4.3, and the individual scored a 3.3 in terms of demonstrated behavior. The next column is the difference between those 2. And if the difference is greater than 1, we give it an orange, or we use a stoplight system. So it's triggering that, hey, this may be an area that truly is a gap. Okay. If the delta between the importance and the demonstrated is small, it's green. And then if it's in between, medium, it's yellow. So a green, yellow, red or orange stoplight system. So you can eyeball quickly areas where your performance is basically within expectation, green, or below expectation, red. The last column is where your score landed within the benchmark. The arrow down means your demonstrated behavior was south or less than the benchmark. If you were within the benchmark, the 2 arrows going horizontal, And if you were above the benchmark, then the arrow would be pointing upward. If you were above the benchmark. So you can see for every rater group, every response, the average of every response. If you had managers if you had a manager or managers as a rater group, you will see each manager's individual responses. Those are not averaged. Only the other type of rater groups are averaged. If you did a 180, everyone would be averaged, and you would just have one table like this representing everyone who participated. And then you would have the results for yourself. Yourself is always a group by itself. So again, you'll get a summary for each competency. You'll get a summary of the level of importance and how the rater group rated you, and then you'll get the table that lists each element or each behavior. And again, another sample of this. And then at the end of the report, you get a nice roll-up. You get a nice roll-up of or at the end of the section, you'll get a nice roll-up that you can look at. And for each of those competencies, your raters are asked to leave free-form comments. Some may choose to, some may not. I want to just highlight a couple things. One, their comments will be printed exactly the way they typed it in, with no editing, no spelling. If a comment is in a way identifies the rater, we don't scrub that out. I would highly recommend that you're going to want to glance at these, but I would recommend you spend much more time on the numerical data first and try to glean what that data is telling you. Then go back and consider this feedback in this verbatim written feedback. Sometimes the feedback comments may strike you as harsh or unfair, or may strike you as in some way that's not helpful. So it's more helpful in our experience that you focus on the numerical results first, and then when you read these comments, you may integrate them more appropriately. At the end of the report, you get a nice summary chart for each of the rater groups. And it's in this green light, yellow light, red light type of system. So again, you can use this to circle areas and take notes and drive down and see areas that you think you might want to concentrate on. Okay, so again, the purpose of all of this data is for you to select a critical few items you're going to focus on going forward in your development plan. Now, separately, we will be sending you, or have sent you already, some worksheets that you can use to gather this data and sort it out and synthesize it and drive it down to the critical few. But another really slick way to do this is to use the online platform. To log in with the link we sent, we can always send it again. And using that, you're able to walk through your report. You're able to look at each rater group independently. And then when you look at the individual comments, you have an opportunity to check mark the items that you feel are important for you to reconsider. And at the end, once you've gone through all your data, this platform will aggregate up the areas that you picked, and then it will encourage you to drive it down to just a few that are really critical for yourself. So this is a slick way for you to synthesize a lot of data. All of this is driving to an individual development plan. We have sent you a couple different formats. You can use whatever format makes sense for you or your organization, or a format that everyone has agreed on. But what we like to do is focus, using the KSS system, focus on things you should keep doing, those things that people deemed very important and that you're already doing well. Don't lose focus on that. So there will be some items in your development plan that you're going to keep doing. And then sometimes where there's gaps, you might identify behaviors that you want to stop doing or behaviors that you want to start doing. This is just a nice way to balance your individual development plan, but feel free to make it your own and develop the plan the way you see fit. So our next steps are typically that that you will review this data and have some soak time with it. We are reviewing the group format now. And then at some point, you will schedule time with me. We will do a one-on-one, reviewing your data, making sure you didn't miss anything, pulling together your other assessment data if you have it for the PXT or for the DISC assessment. You'll go back and you'll update your plan. You'll modify it a little bit. We will then follow up with a facilitated meeting with your boss or manager and yourself to review that development plan and other aspects that came up in the survey. And then your development plan, you'll finalize that. And then ideally, you'll work through that. Typically, we like to try to measure progress using the same survey 12 to 24 months later. So that's something you may consider. And if you did this program as part of a team, we will have a team summary for you and actually in a little employee engagement survey for you. And of course, we don't want to leave you hanging, and we have several different training and development programs that knit together with the same information, and we can explore that at some other time. We focus on these behaviors because emotions are part of our life. And whether we like it or not, we are all emotional beings trying to be rational. And the people you're working with, the people you're leading, have emotions too. And when you're able to be very aware of your own and those of others, you're going to be more effective. So I invite you to call me or send an email with any questions, comments, or concerns. I can be reached at 888-537-6308. And I am so excited to help and participate with you in this developmental journey. Thank you very much for your time and attention.